Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining this press conference on the annual meeting of the Global Future Council's 2024. My name is Jan Zopf. I'm the head of media at the World Economic Forum, and I have a panel with distinguished guests here with me today to speak about what we are going to try to achieve in the coming days. So I have with me from the World Economic Forum, Mirek Dusek, who is the managing director and responsible for this meeting. We have Minister Sultan Al-Olama, Minister for Artificial Intelligence, or should I say for the intelligence age, as you announced that you might consider. Also for digital economy and remote work applications for the UAE. And then we have Lauren Woodman, who's co-chair of the GFC on Data Equity and AI Governance Council. So this session is also live on a webcast, so we welcome also our audience online. So I'm going to turn to you first, Mirek. What will be the focus of this meeting for today and tomorrow?
Yeah. No, thank you first. This is a culmination of a 2-year work. So it's the mandate. We have 30 councils, global future councils on frontier issues that are important for the global agenda. And they are culminating here. So it's 2 years of work that they've been doing together. This is the second convening they're having. But this is a community that stays in touch also through our digital platform and other means. So just to underscore that there is a whole body of work that is iterated throughout the 2 years. Number two, as I said earlier, this is building on 15 years of work together with the UAE. I was fortunate enough to actually be here when we launched the Global Agenda Councils in 2008. And while we are now gathered under the Global Future Council's nomenclature, the mission remains the same. It is the biggest brainstorming, the biggest gathering of experts from around the world, from different disciplines as well, that are trying to not only exchange knowledge, but also iterate towards solutions on issues that are important for the global agenda. And as we already have spoken about that as well, if you look at the global landscape right now, I truly believe that this meeting and this network could not be more important. We are seeing, we talk about the intelligent age, and this is of course something that you heard also in the opening plenary. But even if you have other concepts for the future, I think you would agree that people have a feeling that with COVID, or maybe then some go back to the financial crisis, but that we are in a transition to a new era. And the playbooks and what I said earlier, the catalogs of knowledge that we've accumulated, some of them are not fit for purpose. So there are, the need for new ideas is there around growth, around development, around health, around frontier technologies. And so this is really the essence of why we are here. And just to say also the headwinds. The headwinds are clear. I also talk about a plausible scenario of an age of fragmentation. And we are, of course, having fragmentation in the global economy, in certain societies, geopolitically. And the headwinds are clear too. So in that environment, you have ideas that are even more contested than ever. The contestation of ideas has never been greater. Not necessarily bad, but it's a fact. So the need to really be able to iterate around ideas has never been greater. You have also then the issue of how do you collaborate on knowledge, and particularly in certain fields, if you look around, national security is seeping in. And so we talked about industrial policy, implications of national security for economic decision-making, but it's a fact of the current reality that you have certain fields of the economy, but also research that are now considered, for example, to be of sensitive nature, national security considerations, and therefore you have a decreased levels of academic collaboration among and between certain nations. And then also the issue of, obviously, how do we access knowledge, and the whole role of technology. And as you know, we, for example, consume a lot of knowledge through platforms. Is there knowledge and ideas that are just out of sight for us, given that we may have only select platforms that we're accessing? So just to make a case for how this is more important than ever, and just to finish that, we are covering holistically. You ask, what is the purpose? What are the topics we're looking at? So there is a whole set of councils that are looking at technologies that are driving the intelligent age. From AI to quantum to energy technologies, but we are also looking at climate and nature, and we are very focused also on the economy. So this is also going to be a big issue or big topic for the annual meeting in Davos. How do we relaunch growth? As you know, we're a low growth environment, 3%. How do we relaunch growth, but how do we relaunch it in a way that will get us the growth that we need, particularly focused on people and the planet? Thank you.
Thank you, Merrick. Minister, of course, you can talk to us about AI, but I would like to hear from you also as a host. Now, how significant this meeting is for you as a country and for the region?
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege being with all of you today. I think this is a historic year for us. It marks 15 years since the launch of the collaboration with the World Economic Forum on the Global Future Councils and us hosting them as well. I think there are multiple things that we can talk about in terms of value, but the first thing I'd like to maybe touch upon a point that Merrick mentioned. Merrick said that national security is an important element of decision-making within governments. I think the number one thing that we need to think about when it comes to national security is awareness within the decision-making process, or national awareness. If the decision makers are aware of what are the trends, what are the things that are happening around them, they'll be able to take the right decisions. So the pretext to everything that we're doing in the UAE is awareness, right? Understanding what are the trends, understanding what are the tides that are shifting, and then planning effectively for that, taking the right action and achieving the goals that we needed to achieve. And you see that this has been the UAE story since its founding, since 1971. We've always been a country that thrives on getting the most information, understanding how we can play a meaningful role, and then building not as a way of emulating someone else, but really building something that is fit for purpose here for us, right? Whether it's the tourism industry that was built in the UAE, it wasn't copying whatever tourism industry was in Egypt or in Greece or in other countries. We built something by attracting the right people, by building the right plans. And the Global Future Council is the continuation of that. There's a very interesting paradigm here. There's a lot of value for the World Economic Forum because you are an agile, ambitious, driven nation that's able to attract people from east, west, north, and south. And you're able to really instill in them this sense of urgency. Right? In the UAE, you come here and you feel like there's an urgency to create the future. It's something that's in the air. For us, we're able to leverage on the World Economic Forum's network to first understand what policies need to be changed, understand how we're able to pivot as a country if needed, but also maybe push out important bits of insight to our government officials, to the government officials in the region and the world as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. Lauren Woodman, can you tell us a little bit more about the work of the Global Future Councils and how you move the needle on different topics there?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity as a participant, to reflect on the incredible work that has happened, and I give enormous credit to both the forum and to the government of the UAE to bring together all of these different. I think there's 500 of us in this particular round, looking at 30 different thematic areas that are incredibly complex, incredibly connected. And really with the question, to the minister's point of saying, what should we know and what should we be thinking about and how are these questions interrelated? And, certainly at a time when I think we are at an age of transition, as, Professor Schwab said, from industrial to intelligence or whatever we want to call the future, there are a number of questions around what will happen. How should we think about the economic transition, the environmental transition, the geopolitical tensions, and, you know, all of that in combination with the technology trends that we are seeing, and the ability to do that within the council with all of the diverse perspectives in a multidisciplinary approach is really fascinating. And it allows us to, you know, start to put some collective thinking and knowledge around both places that need further inquiry and further work, or, as we've seen out of a number of places, where we can take collective action. And certainly the work of the forum and its different initiatives and its different centers, and within all multilateral organizations and multinational organizations, then take that work forward. And those things live on, whether it's the global risk report that we all read each year, or the future of jobs, or the, you know, the ocean action. All of these things are things that have come out of these conversations, and there's real value in bringing together those perspectives and providing some focused attention so that we can move forward together.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add a few words specifically about your council?
Yeah, I had the real privilege of co-chairing our work on data equity with a particular focus on AI, and in particular generative AI. And, you know, not surprisingly, artificial intelligence has been a real area of focus both here and elsewhere for some time now. And really the question that we had in front of us was, how do we start to think about equity in the context of the development of these systems, and how do we start to provide some understanding and a baseline vocabulary and a way to approach the building of AI systems, the continued building of AI systems, in a way that is both inclusive and equitable for everyone. We know that the underlying data around which many models are built and which large language models depend on, and a lot of the data that we're using is not inclusive and is not fully reflective of everyone that will be affected by the decisions that are powered by these models. And so we wanted to take an approach and say, okay, how do we develop a response to that? How do we provide a framework so that as we are contextualizing the use of artificial intelligence in all of the different places where it will be utilized, that we are bringing in proactively these questions of inclusivity and ethics and responsible use, so that all of us will benefit from the deployment of AI in the future.
Thank you very much. We have now time for a few questions. So if you have a question, please identify yourself and tell us, you know, who you would like to ask the question to. Here in front, please.
Hi, yeah, that's on. Frank Kane from Arabian Gulf Business Insight. I wanted to ask, actually this isn't directed to anyone, I don't think, you know, a rather broader view would be interesting. To get your view on something that Professor Schwab said, because it struck me as interesting, but also rather gloomy. He said, if I got my notes right, for the first time, humanity could destroy itself, just at the plenary now. And he singled out nuclear war, environmental threats, and technology as the three means by which humanity could destroy itself. You know, this strikes me as quite a sea change, really. I mean, he's normally quite an optimistic person. Is this reflective of a change in thinking by WEF? And also, you know, come the time of Davos, which of these three will be most on our minds, do you think?
As you know, Frank, Mirik is also heading the program team, so I don't know if Mirik can give us the full insight already, what will be discussed in Davos. But Mirik, please, if you want to comment on that.
No, thank you, Frank. It was in a larger context. For the annual meeting in Davos, we will be focusing on what Professor Schwab also said in the session. So it is the intelligent age, but actually the theme, which we most likely will have, is collaboration for the intelligent age. So being quite clear-eyed about the fact that there is obvious productivity benefits and other benefits that these technologies all bear, but it will take hard work and collaboration in particular to get there. And so in terms of what we are focusing on in our work, it is what I mentioned earlier today, this kind of paradoxical state of the world where you have on one hand really the promise of these technologies, and I think there is no denying that we are seeing particularly turbocharged by AI, but whole sets of these technologies really are going to market exponentially. So it's not only one technology, it's whole sets across health tech, energy tech, clean tech, the bioeconomy. We'll be focusing on that a lot also because it's linked to growth. So we heard from Masoud Ahmed kind of where we are with global growth, and productivity gains are very important. Obviously, there is also inputs of labor and capital, but kind of the classic economic theory is that productivity is a big factor. And if you kind of look around the world right now, I work a lot in Europe right now. If you look at Europe, that's kind of where they are going. They really try to figure out how to unlock more productivity through innovation and technology, and for example, close the innovation gap with the United States and also partly with China. So overall, there is going to be a lot of focus on growth, a lot of focus on the promise, but very kind of practical focus on the promise of these technologies. Having said that, obviously, when I mentioned the age of fragmentation and the word collaboration is important. So how do you do that in a much more competitive and maybe contested world? If I were to be more dramatic, we talked about industrial policy earlier, for example, with Masoud. That's happening. It has become a reality in the global economy. So how do you unlock those opportunities while at the same time having a more fragmented global economic landscape? So that's a focus. You asked about those risks that were also mentioned, you're right. And so there, I think if we just look around, I think there is consensus right now that because of particularly the war in Ukraine, for example, now we are suddenly seeing that words that were not uttered before are now uttered, and so people are, I think, informed people, experts that have been working on nuclear non-proliferation and arms control are, of course, informing the debate, and I think we need to be clear-eyed that geopolitically, I think there is a different reality, and then, I mean, I can yield to also others here, but we also, our work, for example, on AI is very holistic. So we, of course, work with a lot of companies so that we look at how incumbents are using the technology, particularly Gen AI. We work with a lot of the owners of those foundational models, a lot of the unicorns on the business side. But we also work with regulators. We work with the international organizations like the UN and others who are looking at international collaboration, and we have long-standing body of work on digital safety and the risks posed by the technology. So if I were to answer, I think we're going to strike a balance there, but it's more complicated than that. You know, it is, that pronouncement is in a larger context, and that's where we're going with the focus for the annual meeting.
And maybe I can remind you that we also have the global risk report that always comes out just before Davos. So certainly some of those risks will be addressed there. So yeah, watch out for that. We're also going to have the global cooperation barometer, which will talk about how the world is collaborating or not. So that will be published just before we go to Davos early next year. Do we have another question here? Yes, please.
Hi, this is Dana Al-Omar from The National. So I have a question for His Excellency Omar Al-Ulama and Ms. Woodman, so you guys can divide the question. So basically, you talked about how the UAE is raising awareness about AI and the protection of AI. There are nations that are breaching some international laws with the usage of AI. What are your comments on that? The breaching of UN laws with the usage of AI and EU laws, and what can we do to prevent this? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Please.
I am not an international law expert. I'll start with that. And I think that one of the things that we have all been very cognizant of as we've been thinking about AI governance, and how do we think about the continued use of AI, the continued proliferation of AI, is how do we make sure that we are building the right incentives in place for AI to be used for good and not negatively. That is very hard to do. There are international structures in line that help corral some of that, but not all of that. And that's true in everything, right? I mean, we can't prevent all of the ill wishes of the world, but we certainly try as much as possible. Part of that challenge has been around building awareness and driving transparency. It is a lot, what's the phrase, sunlight is the best antiseptic. You know, there is a lot to be said around having informed policymakers, having informed consumers, having folks aware of when decisions are being made on their behalf and what data is being used to do that, and where those decisions are having a downstream effect. And so part of what we have tried to do is to say these questions of transparency and accountability and data provenance and so on and so forth have to be built into systems and should be a part of every conversation so that we can start to identify places of greater risk, and hopefully point things in the direction of greater impact and greater good.
There's not much I can add, but I will say a few things here. The first is you're speaking about this as if it's a new phenomenon, but it's not. It's been a phenomenon, unfortunately, since the advent of the technological age. People have been using technology in good ways and in bad ways. I think as governments, we've always been reactive. We have not been proactive, and this was the issue that we faced over the last probably 100 years. We've been calling for this since even pre-2017, since before appointing the Minister for Artificial Intelligence. The UAE has been calling for proactive regulation, proactive guardrails when it comes to artificial intelligence and other technologies as well. And I think there is a need for us to instill agility within that process. Mostly the deliberations that take place, whether it's in international organizations or within governments themselves, are extremely long, take many, many years, wherein the problem is in the here and now. We've seen that with social media. So today people are talking about the issues that social media is causing, probably some of the answers and some of the regulatory guidelines that are needed. But I would say social media was a problem in 2008, 2009, 2007. So the advent of that age was more than a decade ago. And today we're talking about potential solutions, and we have seen the impact of that in politics. We have seen the impact of that in mental health and the crisis that we're seeing. We have seen the impact of that on societies as well. So we maybe renew our calls for proactive decisions to be taken by governments, maybe faster and more agile processes. I think we do not have the time to afford to wait for this to get out of hand. And genuinely speaking, I think if the public discourse is better informed, decisions are going to be faster. So the job of the media is to ensure that this is top of mind. It is to ensure that we are able to get the message across. So there is enough of this in the public discourse that governments can take more action. Now you're going to ask me, what is the UAE doing about it? My answer is, in all honesty, the UAE on its own cannot do much, because this technology is a transversal one. It crosses borders. It's a technology that is moving very, very quickly. So the only answer is an international reaction to it. Today, whatever restrictions I put internally, because of the nature of social media and it crossing borders, there are ways for people to create deep fakes and to, have them spread in the UAE. So unless there is a global momentum around that, there isn't much we can do. So we renew our calls for a global discourse, a global set of actions to be taken. Maybe the UN Secretary General's high-level advisory board on AI was a great first step. There's a lot that has been discussed there that we need to action today. And you will see that within our mission in the UN, we are making our voices very vocal and heard there. Hopefully, we'll be able to see a lot more action in the coming period.
Thank you, Minister. We will have time for one last question. Yes, please, here.
Keir Simmons from NBC News. I'd like to hear your take on the challenges for countries that are caught in the middle. Here in UAE, we are between East and West. How do countries in that kind of position navigate that. And AI is on the front line of that. Your Excellency, Minister Al-Olama, talked very eloquently this morning about flexibility. But there are countries that are saying, we don't want you to be flexible. We want you to choose sides. And how do nations deal with that? You notice I asked that question without naming any of the countries making those calls.
Is this a UAE specific question? So do you want me to answer it, or?
So I'm interested in the views of the panel.
Look, this is not this is not a new phenomenon. As technology advances, as we understand, the impact of the technology, you will see more friction, you will see more polarization, you will see a need to choose sides, and we understand that because if you look at history, history has been maybe a teacher in that domain. I would argue there is a need for us to have countries that are neutral because in certain fronts, both parties need to understand what they can do to ensure that catastrophe does not strike. And I think there is a need as well for continuous dialogue because we are exploring the frontier here. This is a technology that is always breaking the boundaries that we set for it. It is achieving more than we expect. So I don't think it's in anyone's interest to create two isolated echo chambers in the world. And there is a need for us to have continuous dialogue and discourse. That is especially why the UAE needs to stay neutral. We are advocating for that. I think it's a very delicate issue. But also, I think the forum and platforms like the forum and these international organizations being a public town square where people are able to come and showcase what the technology can and cannot do, what is the impact of it, what are the learnings, is necessary. It is not a luxury. We have moved beyond the luxury of discussing technology openly. We have moved beyond the luxury of waiting for something to happen and taking action. I think this is the time right now for us to think of this as a greater, whether it's source of evil or source of good, than a specific individual, a specific company, and a specific nation. We need to talk about it as a technology that is either going to be an existential threat or an existential opportunity for humanity.
Maybe just, so as the minister said, we do a lot of work in terms of looking at how this AI revolution, if you were to call it that, can be inclusive in terms of the kinds of economies that are not only consuming those AI services produced by others, but actually are co-shaping them and are more upstream. It goes back to the spirit that with which we established the Fourth Industrial Revolution centers, for example. We started in the UAE, but we have 20 of them around the world on different continents, with the purpose that there is agency for smaller countries, for countries that are at different stages of development. They should have agency around shaping this technology. In particular, as you know, there's also a threat that AI could actually could deepen, if we don't get this right, it could deepen the inequalities in terms of access and usage of technology. So I think this is a very important question. There is the issue of dependency. So a lot of it will be around, okay, people are trying to de-risk, decouple, reduce dependencies, but it is very important, at least for us at the forum, that we, through our work, we are looking at how this AI revolution can actually enable smaller and medium-sized countries in different markets to be on the front foot when it comes to shaping this technology.
Thank you, Mary. Lauren, anything you would like to add before we close?
The only thing I would add is, having lived through a number of technology revolutions and changes in the past, I think we always worry at the beginning of, what is it going to look like 10 years? And I don't think that any of us have gotten very good at predicting what that looks like. I do think that the efforts to be inclusive from the very beginning give us the opportunity to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made in the past. And if I knew how to avoid those mistakes, I would have lots of recommendations for both the forum and governments all around the world. But I do think we've learned from those elements. I do think that it is, as much as we worry about the risks of AI, and they're legitimate and we should take them seriously, but there are also tremendous opportunities at every aspect of society for big and small countries, north and south, east and west, and everyone in between. And I think if we do not commit ourselves to building something that is equitable from the beginning, we miss those opportunities out of fear and unwillingness to cooperate, and that would be a real tragedy.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists today. Thank you to the audience in the room and online, and I wish you all a successful meeting. Thank you and goodbye.